Hello, my name is Voya and welcome to my deep guide and to a very different type of a video, and the first out of several that will be coming out over the course of coming weeks as I finish the work that's been involved in all of these things. It's gonna become more clear once you actually go through the video. So let's start with a little bit of a backstory, shall we? E-paper displays are one of those rare technologies that just feel right for certain types of things. They're easy on the eyes, favor good lighting conditions, incredibly power efficient, and offer a reading experience that's as close to a paper as you can get currently. Unlike the bright and vibrant LCD and OLED screens, e-paper is all about comfort and simplicity and making it perfect for long reading or writing sessions. But while the viewers of My Deep Guide and myself love what e-paper can do, there is actually unfortunately a very big problem in the whole world of e-paper devices. Do these maybe seem familiar? It looks like it's brighter than the other. I think that the blacks are a bit better. The text looks somewhat fuzzy. It could be an optical illusion. Contrast definitely looks better. Or maybe marketing claims like the new display is 20% brighter than what? What's the reference point? The new display offers increased clarity and contrast. By how much? Compared to what? The front light without any harmful blue spectrum. Really? As a reviewer of e-paper devices, I often struggle to describe a screen performance. That is my goal. I try to do that, but it is a struggle. The best I can offer is an objective take on a subjective impression supported by images. But I think that everyone would agree that that's not really a measurable, repeatable, or reliable type of characterization or finding, or, you know, as objective as I try to make it, it's not really it. And to me, that's always been some form of unacceptable. For the past several months, I've worked hard to develop something that I believe is critical for the world of e-paper devices, a framework to move beyond subjective impressions. So let's start with something that hopefully most of you will agree with, which is that screen performance in e-paper devices is more than just the resolution or PPI. Resolution and PPI is important, but it's much more than that. So I did a lot of research, and through my research I found that basically readability and clarity are the most crucial aspects of a screen performance on an e-paper device. Now, these can be objectively evaluated through four key factors. Number one would be contrast and uniformity, which basically influences how easily content can be distinguished on the screen. Number two would be sharpness and clarity, which determines the precision of text and images. Number three would be illuminance, which is basically how visibility is affected under different lighting conditions. And of course, it has to do with the character and the quality and everything regarding the front light of a device for front lit devices. And number four, we have the dynamic performance, which is assessing the responsiveness and clarity of images and content during dynamic interactions. Each of these categories ideally should be tested and measured using a dedicated methodology to produce results, repeatable results, reliable results, and benchmarks. Today we will be exploring the number one, which is the contrast and uniformity test methodology from what I call My Deep Guide Display Analysis Framework, or MDG-DAF, or let's just call it Display Analysis Framework, or DAF for short. Let's explore the problem and why it matters. The problem is with the challenge involved in comparing and grading e-paper devices. There's no independent verifiable data or measurement standard that we currently have. Subjective reviews dominate due to the niche and, because of e-ink, monopolistic nature of e-paper technology. And we have then, as a result, observations like great contrast or average brightness, and these fail to reflect a measurable performance there's no really strong meaning or weight behind such claims. Another aspect that's also important and doesn't really currently exist is the importance of transparency and standardization. So if we have transparency and standardization, there are benefits for everyone. Customers gain clear insight into the real-world performance. Manufacturers can easily identify areas of improvement because of the granularity of the testing, and the reviewers achieve objective and comparable results, and finally have some kind of threshold and something to basically stand on more firmly than just observations. The Display Analysis Framework, or the DAF, is a methodology that offers repeatable, meaningful insights into the deeper aspects of e-paper screen performance. And basically what it aims to do is bridge the gap, which is really observable right now, between the subjective impressions, which is basically like 80 to 90% of what we have currently in the e-paper industry, and measurable and actionable data. While the subject matter of this video is very technical, I'm trying to get a balance between technical, which is important for a certain portion of the audience that will be interested in those aspects, and try to connect the technical aspects of it to a more digestible and more approachable type of stuff for the other side of the mydeepguide audience, because I'm lucky to actually have a very wide range of audience that have wide ranges of interest. So with that in mind, me trying to balance these things, let's get into the testing workflow, because like any other workflow or framework, it is important to be transparent and offer the full transparency of the testing workflow so that people can independently verify it and know how to try and reproduce the results if they want to do it on their own. It took a long time and a lot of iteration and refinement and testing and retesting and refinement, re-refinement and re-iteration to get to the established workflow that I have now in front of me and that I'm presenting to you. At the moment, I feel confident enough into the results and the robustness of this methodology that it's something that's worth actually showing and starting to employ as a regular type of a testing methodology. So let's explore what the framework consists of. Well, it all starts with obtaining the data, and in this case, it's image capture. So I had to create a robust testing methodology that required consistent, controlled, and very precise conditions for me to be able to actually capture meaningful data that is always going to be within the acceptable thresholds to be repeatable and controllable. So it starts with consistent, controlled, and measured environment. And in this case, this is an isolated light box that has really consistent type of lighting conditions and a room where I'm able to actually repeat the same type of conditions. Now, I'm a proponent of, when dealing with these types of things, of trust but verify, right? So the second aspect of this is I also employ the use of a professional grade illuminance measuring equipment, which in this case is the Sekonic C800, which is a fantastic professional type of device that offers so much sensitivity and detail that it's a very rigorous type of verification whether or not the environment, the starting point of gathering data, is consistent or not. Then we go on to the capturing of the data, and that is done via the camera. So the camera setup in this case is my trusty old Canon 70D that is equipped with a prime 50mm lens. Effectively, this is 80mm lens due to the cropped sensor on the 70D for anyone who wants to kind of reproduce the same exact results, and the height at which the camera is placed in relation to the floor of the light box is 70 centimeters. Why a prime lens? Well, the prime lens is important because it offers near perfect consistency, greater sharpness, and reduced optical distortions. The second aspect is to nail down the as faithful as possible representation and capturing of the environment and the images, and then lock those settings down completely. So that means that I had to create a fixed preset for image capture that ensures consistency across the tests. I employ manual focus when capturing images, and this is customized for each device to achieve the sharpest possible results. This is based on the experience with the same lens and this camera and all these kinds of things with my hobby, which is astrophotography. So there I kind of understood the importance of manual focus. The autofocus can do some things, but manual focus, it's simply the way to go. And once you've trained yourself to nail down the pinpoint tiny points of light, capturing the sharpness of the image on a big display is not really as big of a challenge, so that kind of works well. And the second part is also the use of the remote trigger when capturing the shots. And this is important because it minimizes physical disruption during capture by pressing the button and then introducing shake or inaccuracies. And this is also a technique borrowed from my experience with astrophotography. The images are captured in raw photo format in 16-bit for maximum detail, preserving 65,536 levels of brightness as opposed to mere 256 levels of brightness on a standard 8-bit image. Once the data has been captured in a controlled and good manner, now it's time to process the data or process the images. And the captured images undergo a rigorous analysis using custom pipeline. So the software that's used primarily is ImageJ, which is a professional grade image analysis tool with the additional initial use of Canon's Digital Photo Professional, I think it's called, DPP, which is used only to basically convert the raw photo to a black and white TIFF, uncompressed TIFF format. So that one, the Digital Photo Professional, I found that it's the least disruptive, or the program that offers me an option to disable absolutely everything, any kind of processing, and ensure that the captured raw photo has not been adjusted or nothing has been done to it without my prior knowledge, which was not the case with the majority of other actual tools that I tried initially. So that's why I used that one, and I initially converted from color to monochromatic, preserving the 16-bit and not introducing any additional adjustments to it, and of course then save to uncompressed TIFF. Once that's done, then everything goes into ImageJ and everything is then handled there with confidence, because ImageJ is a really, really good tool. Precision is a really important aspect here. So as mentioned before, 16-bit images provide far greater data depth than the standard 8-bit images. The automation is an important aspect here because this type of framework needs to be flexible and agile, and something that I can easily insert into my existing work pipeline when doing in-depth reviews of devices. So I had to create a custom ImageJ macro or scripts to streamline the process and to ensure perfect repeatability. The images are taken in a 1:1 ratio, and the placement of the device is such to ensure the center of the screen matches basically the focal point or the focal center of the camera where it looks. Then the image is cropped to a carefully measured and balanced type of a crop size that allows focused analysis using basically a central rectangle. And that central rectangle ensures meaningful and repeatable measurements because it's the same physical position relative to the lights, relative to all of those things. The effect of potential glare, reflectiveness, or any other aspect is consistent across all of the devices and measurements. Now we need to get a little bit technical. So we're going to talk a little bit about matrix calculations, and I promise I'm going to keep it short, but you might find it interesting. It is most certainly important for anyone interested in this methodology and framework to know what's been used and why. I'm capturing both mean and median levels of brightness, but I'm using median because it determines the most accurate representation of brightness that is being measured. Mean is certainly useful, but the fringe edge cases, the odd dark pixel or the odd white pixel, can introduce really a lot of skew to the actual result. So that one is measured, but median is used when measuring brightness or whiteness and blackness of the e-paper display. Normalization is also used, and it's used to convert the raw whiteness and blackness values into relative scores for direct comparison. The normalization is not using theoretical maximum and minimums, it is using the objective expected maximum and minimums, which are observed through the testing, and then I saw like where the threshold is within these devices, and then I set the caps for the minimum maximum, and then normalization is made that way. The idea is to basically introduce relative scores for direct comparison between 0 and 1, because that gives a much better indication of how devices basically compare relative to each other. Contrast is calculated using absolute raw values, and this is in order to actually ensure the maximum precision that I could get. So which metrics are measured and used? So this methodology evaluates whiteness, blackness, and contrast, which are key factors for readability and clarity. And they have a relationship where higher score is better. Then we have the noise index, and noise index is categorizing into white noise index and the black noise index, and those are measured out separately. This measures the graininess or pixel variation, and here lower noise index is better. Then finally we have the uniformity index, again measured separately, white uniformity index, black uniformity index, and this indicates the evenness of brightness and color distribution on the screen. And here again we have that higher is better. These metrics are combined to create a final contrast and uniformity test results, and these are presented as two composite scores. The first one of which is a visual contrast score, which quantifies the perceived readability of a screen. So basically overall perceived contrast and readability. It evaluates whiteness, blackness, and contrast, and it compares them in a 20-20-60 ratio. Because in my research I ran into studies that actually confirmed that basically between all of these, contrast is the dominant aspect that affects the perception of readability, and therefore contrast carries the 60% weight, and the whiteness and blackness basically divide the remaining 40% into equal to. This score represents how well a device can present readable and visually clear content, and naturally higher score is better. So why does visual contrast matter? Well, for readability, higher contrast ratio makes text or images more distinguishable, which is critical for long-term comfort while reading or working. Then we have perception of quality, where a screen with poor contrast might appear washed out, making it harder to see fine details and making the overall viewing experience less enjoyable in short and long term. And then we also have impact on fatigue, because better contrast reduces eye strain and fatigue, especially for e-readers and devices meant for extended use. The second score that we have is the screen integrity score, and this one quantifies the overall consistency and quality of a screen. So it evaluates noise, as we've discussed previously, and noise that's measured separately in white and black, and also the uniformity index, also measured in white and black. Noise and uniformity is basically a 1-to-1 ratio when determining the final score. And the score represents the screen's uniformity and the absence of distracting artifacts. Higher is better. Why does screen integrity score matter? Well, first of all, consistency, because uneven brightness or color distribution can create like a patchy or inconsistent viewing experience, which distracts and detracts from the overall quality. Then we have reading experience, where high noise levels or poor uniformity can distract the viewer and can definitely negatively affect the readability of text, especially smaller or thinner type of text font. Finally, we have also the perception of premium quality, where a screen with high integrity appears smoother, more polished, and better engineered. This is especially important for e-readers and tablets, where the focus is on text clarity and minimal distractions. Why are these two scores important to take into consideration together? Well, These scores provide a holistic view of a screen performance. Visual contrast measures the display's ability to present text and images in a readable and visually distinct way, and screen integrity ensures consistent, distraction-free quality over extended use. Put them together and they evaluate both first impressions and long-term usability, offering a comprehensive understanding of e-paper display performance. So what does this testing offer and what does it reveal? Well, the methodology itself kind of reveals a lot of meaningful things, but to kind of categorize them into several things, first and foremost, it goes beyond specs. Because it highlights real-world readability and screen quality that you can't really find in current technical specifications, and either they are overlooked or they are not accurately or comparably represented. Then we have that the methodology actually allows for objective comparisons because it provides a standardized way to evaluate devices across brands and generations within the same brand. Actionable insights is another thing because it reveals critical factors like screen uniformity, noise, and usability. It helps with clarity and subjectivity because it offers a measurable data to go hand in hand and help clarify and explain why a display might feel good or bad to a user, and what are the preferences, what are the things, what are the specifics that you are reacting to. So maybe you are much more sensitive to the noise aspect or the uniformity or the blacks or the whites or the contrast. And this kind of methodology, basically the granularity of it, offers a lot more insight into understanding what it is that you react to and what do you perceive as good, what you perceive as bad. And I think that just adds more clarity and subjectivity. The methodology itself, I work hard to make sure that while it is comprehensive, that it is very, very flexible. And two aspects were really important: versatile application. So while this is tailored and kind of adjusted for e-paper devices, the methodology can really easily be adjusted to evaluate equally and across the board LCDs, OLEDs, RLCD. Basically, the only limitation is what can physically fit into the light box. And the second aspect is to make the methodology future-proof because it's open to refinements and advancements as new display technologies emerge, or as I obtain maybe better measuring equipment, such as maybe a better camera than the 70D or something like that. Alright, so now that we know what it is that I've done and what this methodology is, let's look at the preliminary test data on the devices that I had at hand here and see what it actually brings to the table and what type of insights does it give us. Alright, so I'm not going to bother you with the data here, but I'm just going to jump in right ahead into the first findings and just discuss a little bit more about what it is that you are seeing here. And this is simply a proposed type of representation of these values. So as you can see, the first representation here is the measurement of whiteness and blackness. And remember, both whiteness and blackness, higher is better is the scoring system, right? And as a reference point, I measured out the paper device here. Now the paper device is measuring the whiteness is just a white sheet of printing paper, same conditions, everything as normal. And the black, I've really tried to find like many different things. Just printing out the black paper is terrible and it doesn't really offer any kind of meaningful things. So I found the blackest possible commercially printed box that I found, and then I measured it out and used it as a kind of a reference point. And I've sorted them in this section. They're sorted according to whiteness, right? So the whitest the device or the measurement with the highest whiteness is at the top. And it makes sense that the paper is at 0.99. Now remember, it just goes from 0 to 1, right? So 1 is maximum and paper scores at 0.99. And then we have the comparisons here, and already now I find them quite interesting. I'm rounding up to 2 decimal points, but my raw data is like 4 decimals or 5 decimal points precision. The only thing is that I've found that it's quite distracting when I'm using all of that together. So that was the reason for rounding up to 2 decimal points, and maybe for the presentations I think it's fine, but we'll see. I mean, let me know what you think about that. But what I find very interesting is that already immediately we get to see that Scribe Gen 2 and Scribe Gen 1, well, they're not exactly the same, are they? Even though they're displaying the exact same file, exact same page, exact same testing conditions and everything, there is a difference. So Scribe Gen 2 has marginally whiter whites, and they're consistently whiter whites. This is not a margin of error, it's consistently higher. But also interestingly, it has considerably better blacks, because it's scoring at 0.67 versus 0.61 on the Scribe Gen 1. So basically both the whiteness and the blacks, especially the blackness, is better on the Scribe Gen 2. And that actually means that if we go to contrast, we will see that Scribe 2 has a considerably higher contrast score at 6.62 versus Scribe Gen 1 at 6.18. So immediately, as like the first measurements and first things, this type of framework is giving us more insight and more understanding into things that are simply not observable because of the differences, because of the white frame of the Scribe Gen 2 and all of these kinds of things. It's really difficult to kind of find these things. And then we can actually go through all of these and just kind of see what we see, because I find them really interesting. And for me, it's quite interesting to see that the Remarkable 2 is actually just behind Scribes. So it is, and it's on par with Scribe 1 as far as brightness goes, but of course its black score is considerably lower, which we know that because the Remarkable software-wise has issues with the way it interprets and renders black colors. Then we have tab X, and here it's interesting as well because it's fairly kind of relevant and recent, because we have Note Max and then we have tab X. And my comment when I was doing first impressions was, and checking out Note Max and tab X side by side, was like, oh yeah, Note Max is definitely darker, and everybody's commenting on that because it is. You put them back to back and it is darker, but now we have actually a measuring point and something very interesting to see as well. So Note Max whiteness is at 0.57, while tab axis is considerably higher at 0.66, and this is with the paper-like screen protector applied on. So without a paper-like screen protector, it would even probably be even more higher, but even so, it is absolutely brighter. However, Note Max has incredibly good black scores and rendering of blackness on it, while the tab X really doesn't when compared to 0.75 of Note Max. So Note Max 0.74 on blackness, tab X 0.59 on blackness. And that actually means that when you actually go to the contrast score, and remember, the contrast score is the one that carries the most weight, Note Max actually goes higher than Scribe 2 and way higher than tab X. So tab X scores and has a measurable contrast at 6.04 to 1, and Note Max has 6.68 to 1. And that actually tracks, and it makes sense when compared to what Note Max users are saying and what I have also observed, which is subjectively it was like it's more pleasant. I really like looking at it. It's easy to read on. And now we have quantification of that and an understanding of, while yes, it is darker, but the rendering of blacks basically makes it considerably better as a reader device than the Tab X does. Let's check out what does the Supernote family tell us. So we have the Supernote A5X, A5X2 and A6X2. Well, they're fairly close together, so there's not really tremendous amount of differences, but we do see that the employment of a modern panel simply has better whites and same blackness as the A5X, while the Supernote A6X2, same whiteness, but the blackness is a little bit lower. Now, when we actually translate that into contrast scores, that means that basically Supernote A5X2 currently tops the chart of e-ink devices or e-paper devices as far as contrast goes at 6.71. And it's not something that we actively think about or comment on, but yeah, the blacks are really well rendered, and the image quality is really good and pleasant on the Supernote A5X. And yeah, you can see how it relates to A5X and the A6X2, which is considerably down here because of the poor performance of or poorer performance of rendering of the blackness. Then we have a very interesting comparison here. Because we have Remarkable 2, Remarkable 1, and Remarkable Paper Pro, and we have two devices. Paper Pro 1 is my personal device. Paper Pro 2 is the beta testing device that I received from Remarkable, and the Paper 1 is the one with the yellowness. Paper 2 is the one which is less yellowish, right? And it's very interesting to actually see the difference between those two, because there's very significant inconsistency between different Remarkable Paper Pro devices, which indicates inconsistency in the panels themselves. And that's not really the first time that we hear about that, right? Because we've also seen dead pixels, or basically pinholes on books device panels, on big mid device panels, and things like that. Already now, I think that this kind of testing is going to start and give us a better insight into inconsistencies of the e-ink themselves as a company, by what kind of panels they are actually supplying the manufacturers with. Because once they ship the panels, that's it. Well, the manufacturer can't really do much about it. That's what they get from e-ink. But it's also kind of obvious to see that Remarkable Paper Pro generally performs really badly as far as blackness goes. And it's not really surprising, because it doesn't actually have a proper black pixel, and that absolutely reflects here in the scores, and it reflects in the overall contrast score, because consistently whichever variation of Paper Pro that you receive, it will consistently rank the lowest, and basically almost half to the best devices up there. So it's a very big difference. What I really find interesting as well is that we always knew that Remarkable 1 appeared darker than Remarkable 2, but there was no real measurement there to kind of see how it goes. But it's interesting to see that both whiteness and the blackness on Remarkable 1 is considerably lower and worse than it is on Remarkable 2. So that naturally means that Remarkable 2 will score quite a bit higher. So Remarkable 2 contrast score 561 versus Remarkable 1's 4.89. But both are affected by that blackness rendering. So if they were to sort out the blackness rendering and increase that score to higher, then the readability and contrast of Remarkable as a platform would be much better as well. And the last one that I really found interesting as well is the only Kaleido display here device, Note Air 3C. And as expected, the thing that we've always talked about, which was similar to how Remarkable Paper Pro and the Gallery 3 panel is unable to reproduce a good black color, that's the same thing with the Kaleido panels, unable to have good whiteness because of that film on top. That actually produces colors, and that reflects dramatically in the results here, because the whiteness of the Note Air 3C is only at 0.23. However, because it's so much darker, it has incredibly good level of darkness. Actually, the best level of blackness than any other device here on the list. And that means that basically, despite it having really bad whiteness score, because the blackness is so high, the overall contrast that it is able to provide is actually quite high. In measurable ways, it's actually higher contrast than the Go 10.3, but it's definitely a skewed type of thing. So the observation of the whites being simply too dark, obviously there's a point, like a threshold point, where the amount of blackness doesn't seem to matter anymore. And that skew towards whiteness or blackness, I think, plays a major role, because subjectively, Go 10.3, and you put them back to back, I think everyone would kind of agree that Go 10.3 simply seems like a much more, contrasty and better device. Measurably, no, it's actually measurably slightly lower than a Note Air 3C, but only on a technicality because of that blackness skew. Now we go to the noise white index or grade. So that's the thing that I'm kind of wondering about. What do you guys think should? And remember, this is lower is better, right? So the lower the score, the better the uniformity or noise score is. And I have a grading system, which you can see that it basically just takes into account what is the obvious average, and then we go up and higher and lower than that. But I do have that data either in numbers, very fine numbers here, so 3 decimal points, or as a grade. So just let me know what you guys think and what kind of makes sense to you. And it's interesting here to see that the white noise doesn't necessarily mean that the black noise will translate in a good way. And that's really notable with the Remarkable Paper Pro, especially my unit, Remarkable Paper Pro 1. And this is an example why it's important to separate the noise white and the noise black, because Remarkable Paper Pro 1 scores really well, and Paper Pro 2, it scores really well in the noise aspect, in noise index in the white, but when you go to the black, both of them go way down, with Remarkable Paper Pro 1, my personal one, scoring the lowest. So it would have been really misleading if just the white one was measured, but actually allowing the noise measurement in black and white gives a much more complete type of a picture. And you can notice something really interesting here with the Go 10.3 scoring really low. And I think that it's scoring really low because I think that it has, this testing has exposed that my device, this specific device, has one pinhole that is right smack in the middle. And that pinhole is so strong that it actually, affects the result in quite a meaningful way. And I decided to keep it that way because this is a realistic representation of what you can expect, because it is a distracting thing in certain types of condition when a pinhole is visible. So then we also have the uniformity, and I have the same question here. Which do you think is better to use, grading system or the index itself? So yeah, I would really value your input on that, because I'm really kind of, I don't know, I prefer numbers, but grades make perfect sense as well. So it's the same findings, it's basically just how it's represented. But in this chart, I propose basically representing the white index and black index side by side. I mean, I could probably do the same thing on this as well, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. Let me know what you think. So with the uniformity, again, it makes sense that the paper is most uniform. And then again, Scribe 1 scores really good, and Remarkable 2 scores really good with the uniformity here on the white. So this is sorted by uniformity white. As you can see, it descends here. And yeah, you can just kind of pause and explore the results. I don't want to waste too much time on these things, because I want to kind of go back to the final two scores, which are the visual contrast. So all of these scores that you've seen, they basically come down to give us a representation of the contrast and quality of the screen, so in the terms of visual contrast and screen integrity. And as far as visual contrast goes, that would be the dominant score, the one that determines basically like which device has the best performance. And overall, I would argue that the visual contrast is the one that is the most important one to look at, with the screen integrity offering additional refinement and insight into this whole kind of scoring system to kind of make it more balanced. As far as visual contrast goes, well, actually surprising to me is that Supernote A5X2 is the best, and right behind it is actually Note Max. When you consider it, despite it being darker, the overall impression and contrast that it actually gives is really, really high. So then we get Scribe 2, A5X2, Note Air 3C, Go 10.3. That is interesting. They're like almost the same, but there is that skewness that we're kind of seeing, and I would personally kind of disagree with this. Subjectively, I would disagree with this result. I think that I would always grade Go 10.3 higher than the Note Air 3C. So maybe there's something that needs to be taken into account for that skewness of the contrast results. But either way, this is the results that we have currently. Then we have Scribe 1, and quite interesting to see the difference between Scribe 2 and Scribe 1 in the final scores. Quite considerable, despite them seemingly being the same. And the same thing with the Tab X and the Note Max. Very considerable difference between the two. Supernote A6 II, Remarkable 2, then we have Paper as Paper, Remarkable 1, and as expected, unfortunately, Remarkable Paper Pro devices scoring the lowest. As far as screen integrity, so remember this would be like the overall quality of the screen. Not so surprising is the Scribe 1, because it really is a really good kind of screen. Unfortunately, Scribe 2 did have some uniformity and noise issues, and that definitely brings it way down when compared to Scribe 1. So while Scribe 2 has a better contrast performance in Scribe 1, the new screen or the screen protector or whatever it is that they are using, there's a difference. The uniformity of it is considerably lower than it was on the Scribe 1. Interestingly, both Remarkable 1 and 2, pretty much the same type of quality and uniformity, and then we have, the rest of the stuff kind of going around here. Now, another thing that I wanted to show, or the final one that I want to show, is that I also measured the iPad using the same type of testing, and it was just a sanity check to just kind of see these things, and the results basically confirm exactly what's observable as well, which is that under high intensity lighting, the OLED screen on an iPad simply is not able to produce comparable whites, and it more compares to like Kaleido screen than any, like even the worst performing Remarkable Paper Pros. They are brighter in bright conditions than the maximum brightness that an iPad is able to produce. However, the OLED Blackness basically obliterates the scale completely, because the scale is 0 to 1, right? And it's adjusted for e-paper devices and the paper itself, but the OLED, because it's outside of that scale, simply goes outside of that scale, and naturally that translates into the performance of the contrast, where you can see that iPad, while these all are like, oh wow, Supernote A5X2 is 6.71 to 1 contrast ratio, when you introduce like an OLED screen, it just kind of is in a completely different ballgame. So that was simply a sanity check and checking the consistency of the results, testing methodology and all these things, why I included the iPad as well. So I think that this is really interesting and meaningful to see that the testing methodology proposed here and the framework and results do reflect reality, but they now actually quantify it as well. And also thought that maybe it would be interesting to you guys to actually see this. So basically this is the zoomed in black images to the same level of 4 different devices, and I was looking at the noise black index scoring. And here we have as the best scoring in that category Kindle Scribe Gen 1, and the worst scoring is Remarkable Paper Pro 1. This is my own personal device. And then just back to it, we have the Go 10.3, and this is like mid-range is Supernote A5X2, and it's a very, very clear difference between the best one and the worst one. I mean, there's no question about it, but here you can see that even between these two, it really depends. But here's the pinhole that I was talking about, and that pinhole, it's simply not present on other devices. And when that type of inconsistency, and also down here, you can see how much more inconsistency clusters there are. So while if you were to kind of zoom in on a specific part of an image of Go 10.3, you could maybe manage to kind of match it to what we're seeing, but consistently you see these clusters and really strong inconsistencies, which we don't really have on the Supernote A5X2. And that kind of gave me confidence that the measuring kind of methodology makes sense, because the results are observable. So I can see the difference that the data is telling me. I mean, just by scrolling here on the Go 10.3, you can see just how many different clusters and how non-uniform it is, and how the noise performance is really much more different than what we have on the Supernote A5X2. Definitely there's inconsistencies here. That's why it's mid-pack and mid-range. But it's much worse on the Go 10.3, and that's why it actually scores much lower. While when we take a look at the Scribe Gen 1, it just is in a different category than all of these devices here. And here I wanted to just offer a comparison and again sanity check of the results and see if the the data corresponds to observable results and photographed results and basically collected data. And here we have Scribe Gen 2 as the brightest one, right, as number 1, and here we have Note Air 3C as the darkest one in the whiteness category. And you can just see how huge of a difference it is between a best monochromatic screen that we currently have on the devices here that I have to compare with, and versus the darkest or the Kaleido 3 screen, which even at this level you can definitely start to see the matrix on top that basically is the source of all of those problems. Then here we have a comparison that I was also interested in. On the left hand side, this is Tab X whiteness and this is Note Max whiteness, and even when you put them just back to back at such a zoomed level, the difference is strong enough and high enough that it's easily observable. So even when you isolate it, the difference between the brightness between these two, absolutely observable and noticeable. All right, so now that we know that, this one definitely needs a name. During development, I explored various names to encapsulate the essence of the testing framework. So some early candidates were Screen Fidelity Test, and there was the e-paper readability benchmark, there was Visual Balance Assessment, and of course those all have those acronyms, you know, the VBA and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately I chose simplicity and clarity, settling on Contrast and Clarity Benchmark, or CCB. Makes it simpler, right? So the name captures the purpose of the methodology, so evaluating contrast and clarity, and it kind of displays it, and it's self-contained in the name itself, making it a lot more accessible than something super sexy and fancy. So yeah, ain't sexy, ain't fancy, but I think that it does the job well. I wanted to share some of the challenges and the lessons learned during this whole process, because maybe you will find it interesting and maybe somebody who's interested in this type of work will find it also useful. First one was lens selection. Well, yeah, made sense to kind of go with prime, but finding the f-stop sweet spot for that lens, that was really important, because it was crucial to find a sweet spot that balances focus, sharpness, and minimizes aberrations in image captured. And that required a lot of testing. And just like a general type of advice for anyone who's kind of considering this, when you're setting the aperture on your lens, you really want to stay away from minimums and maximums, because that's driving the lens to its limits, but either minimum or maximum. What I've found is that the majority of lenses, basically the sweet spot is going to be somewhere between aperture set at 4 or 8, somewhere between those two. For safety, I started my measurements from 3.2 and then gradually all the way to 8. And then I compared all of those and processed them, and then compared and processed and analyzed and stuff like that to find the sweet spot. And the sweet spot for this lens is 5.6. Now, majority of lenses, you will find that they do really like the f-stop at 5.6, but I do encourage you to actually do the testing above and below the 5.6 to find where the sweet spot for your particular lens and environment and setup conditions actually is. Another thing was creating a checklist. So this was actually very crucial, because simple but critical steps like, where is it? Yes, this one. Wipe the screen before each measurement. It's really easy to miss when you're doing, especially if you're processing multiple devices at the same time. So these steps, they're critical for measurements, because if you don't wipe the device when measuring the blackness of the screen, any kind of smudges or inconsistencies, it's going to affect the noise, the uniformity, the blackness, and all that kind of stuff. So it's like an incredibly important step to do, but so easy to overlook unless you have a detailed checklist. Oh, raw file handling. Good Lord, that was really stressful and annoying, because I've never handled raw photos in this type of scenario. I handled a lot of raw photos, so I have my Photoshop, I have Lightroom, I have experience with both, and I thought that that's going to be fine. And when I started to analyze actually the results, I started to see like really strange inconsistencies, until I realized and saw that as soon as you open a raw photo in Photoshop or Lightroom, it will apply some sort of processing in some way. And that, yeah, that took a while to actually figure out and nail down and understand. Once you do understand it, then it's easy peasy, and then it's really easy to see. But until you do, that took a while to actually, like, just didn't make any sense, because on paper everything is supposed to be correct, but under the hood it was doing something that it didn't tell you, didn't ask me, and I didn't know it was doing. So that's why I went with the Digital Photo Professional, which for Canon cameras is the one to go with. And I would advise to actually just, if you're interested in doing that kind of stuff, to try and first go with your camera's manufacturer's software, because it is optimized to deal that format in the best way possible. And that was certainly my experience, both because I tried two different cameras, so both the Sony and the Canon, I had a both good experience with their dedicated programs. Yeah, that was definitely a challenge to kind of understand that, but it was really important, because it was key to maintain data integrity. Otherwise, you're going to start getting false data, false results, and yeah, everything becomes pointless. Another one that was really time consuming was determining the ideal rectangle crop size. So remember where I saw that I take the square image and then I crop it to a rectangle at the center? That required careful testing to balance the measurement accuracy, relevance, and consistency. And basically the testing was from 10, 50, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, and 800 pixels square. and then processing all of that, getting the data for each one of those, and then comparing them and trying to understand the correlation between the crop size and certain aspects of the data and understanding these things. I'm not going to go too much into details, but the 300 by 300 pixel crop size basically showed, data-wise, showed that it was the most relevant for measuring of accuracy and consistency. It was definitely a learning curve and then some, but ultimately I think that that whole experience was well worth it because it really strengthened the understanding of the data, the observation and and all of the stuff that I was doing there, and basically that in turn strengthened the methodology itself. I think that the results of this type of testing and basically establishing a testing methodology like this is really important for several reasons. First one is that it empowers consumers and users because it helps users make better informed decisions. It provides objective data, enabling viewers to make better informed choices when purchasing devices because there's more understanding and there's objective data behind it. Another aspect is that it also addresses the manufacturers because it shows that, of course, there's room for improvement, but it offers manufacturers less room to hide or manipulate their claims by spotlighting areas that need improvement and pushing them to deliver better devices for everyone. And there's also the transparency and trust element because it offers unbiased results. No matter how much I try to be objective, it's still going to be an attempt at being objective, but it will never be fully objective. The only way to do that is to have a measurement framework like this that delivers transparent and consistent results, cutting through the marketing fluff, Reddit-fueled paranoia, anxiety-driven speculation, or anything else. But more than anything, I think that it's really important that basically it bridges the gap. So at the beginning of the video, I was talking about the importance of bridging the gap between subjective and objective. And this basically makes it possible to move beyond vague descriptors, creating a data-driven language to evaluate and discuss e-paper screen's performance effectively. I wanted to create a language beyond subjective descriptive attempt at objectivity. So the methodology creates a shared vocabulary. For example, visual contrast score, screen integrity score, uniformity index, noise index, and then anyone can use that to discuss and compare and understand the screen performance relative to other devices. And it helps things move beyond anecdotes because many reviews or opinions about screens are forced to be subjective. And they're subjective based on what feels or looks good because there's no other tool, there's no other way to measure it. Even when we as reviewers try to be objective, I know that we often lack the tools or metrics to back up our impressions with reliable and measurable data. So I tried to zoom in and back-to-back comparison, and there were many attempts, but I was never really happy with them because ultimately you always relied on comparing visual impression of that to the best of your ability. So these results bridge this gap by offering data-driven objectivity, moving away from vague descriptors like great contrast or average brightness to concrete and meaningful metrics like visual contrast score, uniformity index, etc. So what does all of this achieve? Well, hopefully it achieves deeper understanding because it provides measurable insights that viewers and readers and reviewers can trust. It also should provide for accountability because it enables independent verification of manufacturers' marketing claims, encouraging higher standards of responsibility. My hope is that this methodology provides a universal, data-driven framework for screen evaluation, communication, and elevating the discussion around the e-paper technology to a more consistent, meaningful, somewhat scientific and transparent level, something that we haven't had so far. I firmly believe that this approach has the potential, very strong potential, to benefit everyone, users, reviewers, and manufacturers alike. So obviously this is a big thing that I'm working on. So what are the future plans? Well, regarding the upcoming reviews, the contrast and uniformity test that we've discussed in this video, it will become a standard feature in all upcoming in-depth device reviews on mydeepguide. Also, work is already underway to finalize the remaining 3 testing methodologies, so sharpness and clarity, illuminance, and the dynamic performance testing. Each of these will be presented on the channel in the same way as they are completed and integrated into the future reviews. Once all the testing methodologies are fully established, I plan to launch a device comparison tool on the mydeepguide website. This tool will allow users to customize the device that they want to compare, the category of comparisons based on their own priorities and preference, all while leveraging a centralized database of these reliable, transparent, and trusted, unbiased test results. The comparison tool will be entirely free to use and hosted on an ad-free page, ensuring no banners, no trackers, cookies, or other distractions, just clean, reliable, free information available to everyone. This is why your support really matters more than ever before, because developing these methodologies and tools is, to begin with, fairly ambitious. And it also requires hundreds, if not thousands of hours of research, learning, testing, refinement, development, implementation, and then again, more research, testing, refinement, refinement, and all that kind of stuff. So your support is crucial in making this possible, and that I can actually continue to work on these things and try to elevate the language that we can use when talking about e-paper devices and technologies and all of these kind of things. And you can help directly by doing one of 2 things. First one is you can always make a super thanks donation as a YouTube comment. And the second one is that you can go to mydeepguide.com/shop, where you can purchase products for the web store. And currently there's a handful of products. So you have MDO, My Daily Organizer 2025 and 2026, which is a hyperlinked PDF file that helps you organize all of your yearly, quarterly, weekly, daily, monthly, personal or professional needs. And you also have the MMP, which is the mydeepguide meeting planner, also a hyperlinked PDF file that helps you centralize, simplify, and organize all of your meeting planning needs. I hope that you found the video and the work presented here meaningful, interesting, and engaging. I know that this is a difficult topic because it can be dry, but I've tried my best to try and kind of shape it in some ways so that it's a little bit less dry. I know that it's still dry, but it's the nature of the whole thing, because ultimately it is a presentation of a testing framework. I'm very much interested to hear your opinion and your impressions on the whole thing, and also to share your thoughts on the presentation of the test results. So when I presented this is just preliminary type of sheet and data presentations. So what are your thoughts on the test results that were presented? Do you prefer, regarding the noise and uniformity, do you prefer grades or indexes? Is there too much information on the screen or not enough? And anything else that comes to mind, because your input is really valuable in this case, because basically what we're doing here is we're together creating this whole thing that doesn't really exist. So as a community, I think we can pull together and then make this thing kind of good. So let me know in the comments down below your thoughts, and thank you for your continued support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video. Definitely share the video if you found it helpful and or insightful, because I think that as many as possible people who are interested or remotely interested in e-paper technology should become aware of the work that is being done and currently introduced on mydeepguide. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in the next video. Bye!